Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Reading Art Enriches Writing, presented by Sherry Sturman, Director of Education at Crayola, and Kristen Walter, Crayola's Innovative Teaching and Learning Specialist. And now I'll turn it over to today's host, Crayola's Education Engagement Manager, Wanda Gray.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are so very excited for today's topic. Just want to go through some very quick housekeeping before we get started, but so happy to have you with us today. Just keep in mind, for the best viewing experience, we'd like to ask that for better audio and video that you make sure that you close other applications that use bandwidth. And if you are having any audio issues, you can use the phone option by clicking more at the top of your screen. And if you'd like a larger view of your screen, you can just hover over the slides for a larger view. And please do remember to post your questions in our live chat at #EdWebChat if you're using Twitter. Also, always like to invite you and remind you to join our community. It's a free community, Champion Creativity, the Power of Art-Infused Education. And as a member of our community, you will receive invitations to all of our upcoming webinars. You will be able to view webinar recordings and have access to the presentations, the slides, and other resources as part of our presentations. Also, to take the CE quizzes and to engage in online discussions with people from really across the world. So please make sure you join our community at edweb.net/creativity. Also, just want to make sure you all are aware that you will receive a certificate of completion for participating in today's webinar. If you are here with us live today, you will receive the link to your certificate within 24 hours, or the next business day, actually, after the webinar airing. If you are joining us by phone or watching the recording, you will need to go into the webinar archives area of our community after you join, and then take the CE quiz, and then you too will be receiving your certificate of completion. True to form, we always love to begin our presentations with a thought-provoking and engaging piece of student artwork, and what could be more thought-provoking than this cool piece here? So this is a piece of student artwork that depicts two colleagues collaborating in a playful way. Imagine the story you could create around these two characters, their facial expressions, their posture, and closed eyes. Our wonderful session today is focused on how art inspires stories. Okay? So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry to kind of kick us off and get us started.
So excited about the topic today, Reading Art Enriches Writing. I'm Sherry Sturman, the Director of Education, and really excited that we are celebrating our 10th EdWeb webinar today. And so if you missed any of the prior sessions, please go to our community and you can watch the recorded ones. And so to celebrate this 10th webinar, excited that I'm inviting my colleague, Kristen Walter, to join in the presentation today. And I thought no better way to introduce Kristen than to have her share with us one of her favorite quotes.
I love this quote. And I love it because it does show how it's not just what we see, but it's the inward significance and the way we relate to the art that we see, how art lends itself as a voice and a student voice. And I love how that's what we're going to be exploring today.
Great, thank you. So I always start by going over our objectives. And our first objective today is that we're going to explore the parallels between written and visual literacy and how both symbol systems convey meaning. Next, we're going to talk about why should we read art, and maybe the title of this webinar really piqued your attention when we talk about reading art and decoding it, just like we would decode text. So we're going to explore that from a historical, biological, and educational context, and then it's really going to come to life when you see how reading art adds personal relevance and learner agency, right? You as the learner, as the decision maker. So we will be decoding children's artwork for insights and see how artists convey meaning. I mentioned in the text box when we were warming up before we went live that we're going to use several pieces of children's artwork today, And what's really exciting is you can base this experience around artwork from your school, your students, and have a very powerful experience focused on this from original art your kids have generated. We are going to be using children's artwork as a springboard for writing. We're going to introduce a few fun, innovative genres here, but can work on any genre. And so you'll see that in our session. And our major intent, the reason that we are excited about this workshop, is that it transforms, the content what you're going to learn today transforms students from passive receivers, right? As a reader, they're receiving what someone else has written, into creators. And that is really the pinnacle of learning, is to create, as Bloom's taxonomy tells us. And it's really exciting that we're inspiring students to move from being writers into being authors. And that there's such a huge difference in that. We're really excited about it. So I just want to give you a heads up before we dive into the content about the Crayola webinar giveaway. And those of you who have watched our prior 9 webinars know that we always get excited about your creating and you're following up on the creative prompt. And so we offer a free Crayola product giveaway to those participants who post what they've created. And we usually tell you this at the end, and it was suggested that we give you the heads up right now at the beginning so you can be thinking about this as we go through the exercises. And all you need to do is to write the 6-word story that we're going to explain to you in a few minutes and illustrate your story extension. You will get instructions on how to post it when you're a member of our community. It's really simple. You just need to put it up by September 28th. We always like to use the date of our next webinar, so mark that as your calendar, that's the next Crayola webinar, and it's the day that you need to, the final deadline for posting your artwork. And then it's easy to win. 50 educators who post this will receive 24 boxes of the 16-count Crayola oil pastels. And you see the note here, this gift can only be shipped to U.S. citizens and Canadians, but we are so excited that so many from around the world have joined. Please do share the artwork with us, even though we can't send this through the duty of the different countries. All right, let's dive in. Kristen, take it away.
Thank you. We're going to start with the standards. So as you know, there are 4 strands in the English language arts standards. We have reading, writing, speaking, listening, presenting, and the language strand. But you are probably less aware of the new National Art Standards. So we're going to review those today and show how the parallels between the 2 sets of standards work really well together. And one of the exciting things that one of the things we think is really exciting about the art standards is the first time that we had the 4 groups coming together. We had theater, dance, visual arts, media arts, and music all come together to come up with these common strands. Here we go. So we're going to focus on the visual arts portion of the National Art Standards, and it's exciting that there are great parallels between the English language art standards that we just reviewed and the new National Art Standards. So the 4 major strands are the 4 artistic processes: creating, presenting, responding, and connecting. And within each of those strands there are anchor standards and essential questions. The anchor standards are listed above. So within each of those standards, like within creating, we have generating and conceptualizing new artistic ideas and work, organizing and developing those ideas and the work, and then refining and completing our artistic work. In the presenting, we have how you analyze, interpret, and select artistic work for presentation, how you develop and refine your techniques and your work for presentation, and then how we convey meaning through the presentation of our artistic work. And then in responding, we have how we perceive and analyze our work, how we interpret the intent and the meaning in our work, and how we apply criteria to evaluate the artistic work. And then within connecting, how we relate these ideas and works with what's going around us in society, in our culture, the historical context, how we want to deepen our understanding by connecting the art to those things around, and then how we synthesize and relate knowledge and personal experiences to make art, which is just incredibly important. And then some of the essential questions include: how does art help us understand the lives of people of different times, places, and cultures? And then what's so important, an essential question for today's workshop, is how can viewers read a work of art? And that's what we're going to be doing together. Gary? Oh, nope, sorry, that's me. So one of the best ways to see the parallels between the standards and is to align this crosswalk we have between visual literacy and written literacy. So we're going to take a look at how the new National Art Standards line up with the Language Arts College and Career Readiness Standards. So creating is parallel to writing and involves many of the same skills to generate and conceptualize ideas and work. And creating involves organizing, developing, refining, and completing, just like writing does. In presenting, we relate very closely to speaking and listening, and the skills involved are presenting work and conveying meaning through that presentation and directly paralleling the speaking and the listening strand. Under responding, we have the ability to perceive and to analyze work, to interpret intent and meaning, and to apply criteria to evaluate work. And this directly parallels to the language strand. And then the connecting strand in visual literacy parallels with the ability to relate ideas to a broader context and personal experience to make meaning. And it's the essence of reading. So it gives kids that background, the schema, the hook, connecting our art to our written literacy. And then with some poetic license, we're going to see how these standards directly align through today's workshop.
Okay, so when I outlined our objectives, I said we were going to discuss why read art. And I really do mean discuss. So please use the text chat box and share your point of view on these questions. These are really essential questions. There isn't, one right or one wrong answer. They're more for us to think about a context. And the first one is a biological context, right? So consider neuroscience and anthropology, right? The history of humanhood, and how they support humans' capacity for vision and observation long before there were written symbol systems, and how visuals, any kind of visual stimulation, is a primary means to transfer information, to get our attention, and for memory retention. So this particular insight came from the International Reading Association. In a document, they have pulled together the research on teaching literacy through the communicative and visual arts. Would love to have you respond to this question. I see some people are saying they're having a hard time with the audio. Sorry about that, but we're really just talking about this first question you can see on the slide. So share your point of view. I see here, right, the classic adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that we are able to see get insights into ancient French culture looking at the cave paintings. Absolutely. So biologically, we know the brain is hardwired visually, and we know how important it is for visuals to help us make meaning and to express our meaning. Let's think about the next context, educationally. And I was inspired to see this presented in the New York State Education Department's resource on using art as a tool for teachers of English language learners. And this document was really focused on best teaching strategies to help students who are new at learning about and through English. So they could be proficient in another language, or they could be young and unfamiliar with written symbol systems. But this document talks about how integrating visual art with written language adds relevance and access for English language learners of any age and reluctant readers and writers. A quote there is, the arts have a profound ability to enrich the lives of all they touch and can be an invaluable tool for enhancing the instruction of English language learners. I don't know how many of you are supporting English language learners in your schools, but this is really a very important way, and I can see in your comments that you're talking about. It also provides great access to parents. In the warm-up, we were talking about parent and family engagement. So think of how this welcomes a parent in who is not very proficient with English, that's not their primary language, and how using art can draw them in. Now, this third context is actually one of my favorite, because it really sparks some of our thinking about educational history. And this was an idea presented in the National Council of Teachers of English report about writing in the 21st century, and their former president, Kathleen Blank Yancey, wrote this quote, that writing has never been accorded the cultural respect or the support that reading has enjoyed. In part because through reading, a society could control its citizens, whereas through writing, citizens might exercise their own control, their voice. And so I ask you to jot some answers in the chat box to the essential questions. How does composition, both in writing and art, give learners voice? And historically, how did literacy focus on children reading what adults wrote serve to transmit society's values rather than encourage original composition and the sharing of original thought? I see someone's writing about using sketch notes, wonderful sketch notes, sketching idea webs, doing storyboards visually. These are great ways to help students who are either proficient at the English language or who are not, to start making their thinking visible. So I was particularly intrigued by that historical perspective. When you think of classic child development, we know that young children build their literacy skills by drawing a picture and telling a story, and often an adult will be the scribe to that story. And so it is a more natural way to be a composer or a creator and to start building literacy from that lens rather than asking kids to struggle with an abstract symbol system and to sound out phonics without any kind of context or voice. So isn't that an interesting perspective to hear these three sources, and something for you to chat with your colleagues about in your professional learning community? So we're going to be translating that now into a personal experience, because as much as we can talk about historical and neurological context, there's nothing like a personal experience to bring all this into focus for you. So what you're going to find when we decode art for insights and then we use art in a composition rhetorical framework is that it adds personal relevance and it gives learner agency. So learner agency is a big idea that's talked about a lot in educational communities now, about making sure that the learner, whether that's an adult learner or a student, is a decision maker and has some autonomy and some voice in the learning process. And that certainly happens when you go through the experience that we're going to take you through today, where you're going to create based on a piece of art. So in the rhetorical framework, we're just going to briefly outline it here, but you're going to immerse yourself. We're going to be thinking about the intent of your writing, your intended audience, your voice, and your genre. We're also going to give you an opportunity to write. We've selected a fun, impactful, short genre, the 6-word story, so that you can actually put your stories in the text box. And then we're going to create the art to extend the scene, and cannot wait to see the art that you create when you post it in the resource library. So let's start by reading art. And this piece of art was done by an elementary school student, Emma Z. She's a very wise and really phenomenal student to be expressing so many thoughts in her art and in her writing. The art provides us rich insights, and we will go through the process of reading the art. I want to point out that her handwriting is a little light. It's embedded in the piece, so we extracted it and put it in the text box up on top so that you could read it. What Emma Z tells us is that creativity shapes the world, giving us wings. If there's no creativity, the world is a barren field without color. And look at how she uses a field in her art, and she uses wings of so many kind in her art. And she really gives us a sense of creativity's impact on the world. I think that's really beautiful. Now we're going to take a deep look at this piece of art, and we're going to introduce you to something we're really excited about here at Crayola. We've come up with a simple way of examining art. And we love that the acronym is SEEK, right? Because first, let's start by thinking about SEEK. It means, in a true definition, to search for meaning. That's what we're doing. When you seek, you try to find. And you ask yourself and you ask others to gain understanding. So we're going to use the acronym or the acrostic SEEK to help us read the art. So we first ask you, please look at this piece of art and put in the text box, what do you see? So literally just start typing. What do you see? And while you're typing your answers, I'm going to say I think the first thing that strikes me is a person with wings soaring above other people. And what really strikes me, oh, I love the people are typing, that's so great. What strikes me is that the lead character in this piece of art is looking directly at us. So not only does she have a message to tell us, but she's looking at us head on. How would you describe this scene? I'm looking at people saying a happy, free person, the beauty of flight and soaring, right? How do you describe this? Words that come to mind are peaceful, innovative, uplifting, right? Now the next thing, and oh, I just love this. Take a moment. They're flying by so fast. Bird's eye view, dream-like. You are it's really inspired you. A girl flying, the moon is happy, freedom, a person with wings, beautiful. You're really getting into it. I love seeing what you see. Now let's go to the next letter, E. E is for evidence. So you all just said a lot. You can see it in the text box. You're telling us what you see. And now we're asking you for your evidence. Why did you say that? Describe the evidence in the art that supports your thought. Oh, I love Stephanie from New York just wrote freedom of exploration and reaching to the top and having your adventure and soaring above the ground. Absolutely. So those are great things you're seeing. Now I ask you, what is your evidence? And think about some of that evidence. First of all, what strikes me is the statement about creativity being literally embedded in this piece. And I also see a contrast between the main character who's floating above and the folks who are on the beach playing, building in sandcastles, grounded to the earth, grounded to the sand. That's an interesting contrast. Another piece of evidence. Did you notice the shadows, right? So we get a sense of the light source. We get a sense of the reflection on the water. What I think is so interesting and so intentional on the part of this artist is that the light source is the moon, not the sun. And so that is an interesting part for what we're seeing. In addition to the moon, we see many stars. And that conjures up all sorts of images of letting your star shine and guided by starlight. Also, there's some evidence of this innovation looking at the inventions that this young artist chose to include in the piece, right? So these are iconic inventions that were very new and truly innovative in their time. They might look like dated flying machines now, but it gives us a perspective on innovation, right? So as you're doing this, I think you get a sense of how powerful this exercise is when students do the exploration either on their own or in small group discussions with classmates. Children of all ages can tell you what they see and point to the evidence that is there and why they believe in their support, the evidence that supports their thinking. The next E gets really interesting, and we at Crayola are so interested in the art processes and the art techniques and the decisions that the artists made in creating the piece. So the next E is explain the artist's decisions. We ask you to pause for a moment on the composition and the content of the piece and reflect a bit on how it was created and the kinds of decisions that the artist made from the technique, right? There's a watercolor wash here. There's a watercolor background. I'm not sure if those stars were actually drawn in, or many art teachers know the technique where you sprinkle granular large grain salt on watercolor and it pulls the color together in a star-like pattern. That could be some of the foundation for it. There's some detail in it, and then there's also quite a bit of perspective and blurring. You get a sense of proportions and colors. Each of those was a decision that the artist was made, and it sets a tone and sends a message. So we'd like you to make some comments in the text box about the artist's decisions. I see someone wrote, absolutely, the artist chose colors that give a sense of calm. Absolutely. And someone asked before how we know it's a moon and not the sun, and that's a really fair question. Um, and I value different people's perspectives on it. I usually associate a silvery or white glow to the moon, and if it was much more vibrantly orange and yellow, I might have associated that color choice with daylight and sun. But it's the artist's intention that informs us so much, and these are cool, soothing colors that set a stage for dreamlike. Think of the proportions. This child, this girl, draws herself with her wings as larger than the airplanes. And what is that saying to us? And look at how much action is in this scene. That the artist intentionally made it action-packed with all kinds of playful activities going on right in front of us. Right. So there is a very mystical and magical technique that adds a warm quality to it and a very engaging piece. So that's S-E-E. Now, what about K? K we use to symbolize know. What do you know? And what else do you want to know? So we know this artist is knowledgeable about the Eiffel Tower. Actually, it's quite a detailed representation of the Eiffel Tower. But we might want to know if she's aware of the role of Paris historically in being very innovative in the arts and creativity. We know that the artist is very aware of shadows and light source. And we might want to know why the artist chose the moon instead of the sun, or as someone pointed out, if it truly is the moon or if it's the sun. But if it's the moon, why the twist? Why all of the activity on the beach in a night sky? And what does this say about flipping the paradigm? So that makes me want to know. I'd like you to type in the box, what do you know and what do you want to know? And another piece that we know is that this artist is associating creativity with invention and innovation. And what I want to know is what inspired the inclusion of these flying machines. These 3 flying machines that you might see at a museum, a historical, the Air and Space Museum, sort of capturing different pinnacle times of some of the early flying machines. And I wonder what inspired that inclusion, right? And then, of course, I think the most important question that I would have to ask the artist is, I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming that she put herself as that central character. And I would be very curious to know what that means for her personally and her sense of where she might be going, where those wings of flight might take her. So just so much that we can see there. So now that you've gone through that exercise and it's stirred lots of thinking for you, we want to show you how you can use this piece of art, but really any piece of art, as a springboard for writing. And when you start to write, we suggest the first thing that you decide is your writing intent. Because some people start to write in the text box what they think we mean by writing intent or what you might put as your writing intent. Some people might call it the purpose. We like to call it the intent. As a writer, it's the first thing you should start with. We recommend that the writer do it personally so that it not be assigned by the teacher, but in fact that the writer, the child, the student decide it. Some thoughts on that? So yes, somebody's right. It's what you're planning on saying. It's what you intend to say. Absolutely. It's your big idea, your main idea. So your intent is not to teach poetry. We'll get to genre later. Your intent is not to teach the 3-part essay. We'll get to genre later. Your intent is, what is the main message? So think about some intents, right? It could be that your intent is to reflect on your own personal experiences with creativity. It could be to talk about what inspires you or what big ideas you get looking at this piece of art. Your intent could be to build upon this notion of inventions, and that inventions solve real-world problems. It could be that your intent is to imagine yourself in a new light, or it could be to approach this in a very surreal way and imagine that you had wings, and where would you go with it, and to talk about the freedom of having wings and soaring above. So we usually, start with sort of what is your intent? You could phrase it as a sentence, as an idea. We'd like you to boil it down to one word. So we ask each of you, select one word to describe your writing intent. Based on this art word, it could be innovation, wisdom. I was so touched by the wisdom of this child, creativity, confidence, freedom, advocacy for the arts. Someone had beautifully drawn tenacity and humor. Whatever your intent is, I'm loving it. They're coming in on the text box. Freedom, confidence, creativity. Absolutely. Pick a word that is your intent. Perfect. Now, choose your intended audience. And I love that a few minutes ago on the text box when we were talking about the process, someone brought up that you need to decide your intended audience. Absolutely. That is the second decision you make as a writer. Your first is your intent, one word that sums up your message, and the second, who is your intended audience, right? Because think about it. It really does vary. What you write really will vary depending on who you're writing this to. So you're starting with the same piece of artwork as your observation, as your springboard. You're thinking about your intent. Some of you wrote responsibility, knowledge, vision, right? I'm loving this, right? So now, who are you writing to? And I sometimes, if students are not familiar with this, I ask them to sketch their reader, right? Because that can be very tangible for them. So to visualize in their mind's eye and to put the visual down on a piece of paper, who are you writing to? Could be to self, could be to siblings, could be to an imagined sibling. Students could be writing to a classmate, to a parent, to an author, to that artist, right? You right now might be thinking of writing to your students, to a colleague, to a family member. You might go broader. You might think of writing to the general public, to a television character or a movie star, or you might come in close to the piece of art and make it really specific. In this case, to inventors, maybe to the Air and Space Museum, which we referenced a few minutes ago as having some of the history of some of those flying machines. You might write it in an open way to creative leaders, whoever envisions themselves to be a creative leader. You might write it to Parisians, right? Or travelers going to France. So think about that. I'm loving who you're putting, right? You're going to write it to your team of new third grade teachers. I love it. We have a third grade professional PLC team, and that's who you're going to write to. A granddaughter, lovely. Oh, writing it to people in the past, the present, the future. What a nice spin. I love that. So, okay, and I see somebody changed their mind. Now she wants to write it to herself. I love it, Lisa. Go for it. Change it. Write it to yourself. So, because you are going to write. So it's very important to think of your one-word intent and your audience. Now, we have the third piece that you're going to make a decision about. You're going to pick your voice. What's really nice is that the written voice and the visual voice are companions here. Now, Kristen started us off with one of her favorite quotes from Aristotle, and I would just like to remind us all that the three classic rhetorical appeals or voices defined for us by Aristotle. So this is classic, age-old, rock-solid information, right? But it's good for us to refresh our memories. That the rhetorical appeals can be emotional, right? Those are the ones that pull on the heartstring, stir the empathy, fear, comfort, really any emotion. The logical rational, right? He called that logos. The facts, the stats, the historical dates, the context. Or the ethos, the credible, which is where you approach it from your experience or heritage of others who've come before us, or bring in experts' quotes to support your point of view. So think about how that impacts a written voice and a visual voice, because both the artwork and the words can persuade emotionally, right, and engage the heart, enliven the brain with the rational, or establish credibility or show mastery. So, oh, I'm seeing people here talking about writing with color. Absolutely. One of the best ways to visually communicate through a voice is through your choice of color, right? And we know how the warm colors really enliven and ignite and radiate, and the cool colors we just discussed in the artwork really soothe and calm. So absolutely. Would like you to choose a voice. I see, oh, I'm so glad to see that people have sort of popped up all over. I see a couple emotional. I'm glad to see a credible, a logical, absolutely. So choose your voice. And just as a reminder to it, whenever you see a piece of art, and it can be particularly fun to teach voice to students in a piece of art that has 3 characters, and imagine in the same scene that something that would be said would take a different voice based on the character. So here what I love is we're giving the kitty cat a voice. And just, if you're introducing to students this notion of a rhetorical voice, and you're introducing these classic voices, imagine for a moment, jot in the text box, what if that cat was being emotional, right? Give me an emotional response to that dusk evening scene, right? That cat wants to get home and wants to be tucked in, get some cat food, get tucked in, right? Although actually cats are nocturnal, so trying to think of emotion for a cat. Okay, so then what about the guy in the middle being very logical? I don't know if there's a box, something, equipment in front of them, right? But right now he's thinking something rational, logical. Yeah, right. We got an emotional. Feed me now. I'm going to jump in and get a fish. Being very emotional. If you don't get me to shore now, I'm just going to get my own fish. That's very emotional. So what's the logical voice in the middle? And then what's the credible voice? I'm imagining that the person on the right, because I've seen that person put the oar in the water, that's some evidence I see here, is steering that small little watercraft. And probably is the experienced guide who has the credibility to say, if we don't get moving pretty soon, it's going to be dark and we're going to have a hard time navigating the rapids or whatever it is. And speaking from that experience. So this is just a fun way that in any piece of artwork, you can have children experiment with the different voice, same scene. What would 3 different voices be if we play with this? Okay, yeah, absolutely. Somebody's saying, I don't like this water very much, so you're talking emotionally, I don't like it. And then maybe the logical person's going to give you statistics on how many alligators are under the water, right? They're going to give you some data. So lots of different ways to approach it. Good. I think you got the hang of that one.
Absolutely.
So the other thing that we want to be sure to make you familiar with, and I know we've got some art teachers on the webinar, and I love that. Please, I urge all the art teachers to share this foundational information that you know so well. It's like oxygen in the room for you. But for people who were not classically trained in art, we'd like you to consider that artists convey meaning and they use visual literacy tools, right? So you've got your art element, you've got your principles of design, and that they really convey meaning. So Kristen, walk us through the parallels here.
Sure, absolutely. And we like to use those words because when you're talking about evidence, it gives hard, concrete vocabulary for students to use, and it enriches their vocabulary. And those parallels really give us something concrete to go on with the tools that artists use and the tools that authors use. So the first one, we have line and how that relates to font, something both images and text use. Lines and illustrations and fonts can be bold, they can be wispy, interconnected, they can be imaginary, they can be playful. They express emotions and they can direct the eye. They can be real or they can be implied, just like the font directs the eyes. Sorry. Here we go. The next one we have is color, and it can radiate energy and the excitement. Or they can calm and they can soothe. In the picture we saw earlier, we saw how the colors were calming and soothing in the background. It sort of gave us a clue as to what we saw in the picture. But they can also warn us. Both authors and illustrators use those colors to paint mental pictures, to stir the imagination, and to set the tone. just as shape and form set the illustrator's composition, authors use space and objects to establish the setting and the characters. And both artists and authors use those patterns, the repetition and the movement and the visuals and text to establish the flow, the priorities, and the tone in the piece. And then we're going to look at how balance and emphasis really explore the inference with relationships, who has the power in the relationship, what's the most important part of the piece, both reading and in the art. And then we have unity and harmony, variety and contrast, and how does that work with simile and metaphor? How do we have implied associations? How do we use those to help us compare and to contrast?
Whoops, wait a minute, I think we jumped a little. Yep, okay, good. So the next decision that you're going to make, thank you, Kristen, for going over the art vocabulary. I think that's a really important way for people to think about their visual. Now, the next decision that you as authors are going to make is your genre. And so if we had a little more room in the text box, we could, give you choices of all of these. But we're going to narrow your choices because we want to see your stories. And so for that reason, we've chosen 6-word stories to focus on in this exercise. I'm not sure if you're familiar with 6-word stories, but Hemingway, who we all know, his story is on the right. And Hemingway says that of all the work he ever wrote, that his best work, his most powerful work, was his 6-word story. Let's read that. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Is that the most powerful thing? Right? 6 words. And in a workshop that Kristen and I did together in Boston recently, this is one of the 6-word stories that one of the participants wrote. One day I was all alone. And that's just a powerful, powerful piece, particularly associated with that image. So what we're going to ask you to do is to create a 6-word story, because it will fit nicely in the text box. Please address your intent and purpose. Think about your audience. Use a voice. You might want to be emotional in your story or logical, and write. And we want to see them. Yeah, and we're going to do emoji poems in a few minutes, but let's do some 6-word stories right now. Let's see who's got some stories. Look at the piece of artwork and start typing them in the box. Ooh, feel free and safe to roam. I love that. She set down the book and flew. Wow, you saw some inspiration in the book first, and then it took flight. I love that. I will impactfully soar over Paris. Right. Ooh, flight, feminism, no limits, achievement. All right. That is awesome.
Fly, I make, I am. I love that one.
Yeah. Where does your happiness fly? These are fantastic. My heart flies over all humanity.
I dreamt, I created, I flew.
Wow. Your wings fly high without machines. Wow, that's got some rhythm to it. Today understood the power of learning. I love it. Do you see how impactful 6 words can be? Keep it rolling, guys. I know we're going to be short on time, so I want to keep us moving. So you're sharing your 6 words stories. I love that we're getting into the text box, but we also want you to be sure to upload them with a piece of artwork. So in the community, and I just want to clarify that when you put them in the text box, we have no way to sort of track it and give you the prize. What you have to do is complete this assignment by putting your 6-word story with your visual, and when you upload those together, that's when you'll get your free giveaway in the community. So while we appreciate all this rolling in the text box, that's just your prime or your warm-up, right? So what we want you to do now is to link this. We went from art to words, and now we're going from your words to your art. So we'd like you to illustrate, convey your meaning through your art. And I can see from your 6-word stories that you really have taken this to a whole new level, right? So now have your visual do that. Think about what happens next. Think about what visual conveys your 6-word story. Absolutely. So we'd like you to start. You have a chance to finish it. But in the few minutes that you're starting to do your visualization, Kristen will share with you how she's used this process with kids when she was teaching.
Absolutely. We used this process. One, they drew their own pictures, they created their art, then we used their art to draw these extensions of the story, to really use the art as a piece of evidence-based text. The art became the text. They had the rich vocabulary from the principles of design, the elements of art, and then could take this intent in this audience, in this genre, to really create these stories that had depth and meaning, even from young students where they were telling the stories to each other, to older students. So just a fantastic depth-filled exercise to give students a voice in their drawing.
And then, Kristen, you want to introduce, I know everybody still has their mind wrapped around the flight, but we want to show them how they can do Seek with multiple pieces of artwork. Seek in this piece.
Another piece of art here, Magic Creativity Glasses, by another student art. And the quote that she gave with this art is, when you put on these glasses, you see the world with different eyes. Creativity is so wondrous and magical that it changes the whole world. So we're going to put together what we've talked about with the standards and the elements with the Seek model. So what do we see? I see lots of different cool colors, lots of different warm colors. I see the outside of the glasses, there's trash on the ground. The sky is very dark and cloudy and overcast, but inside the glasses, it's warm and it's soothing, and there's lots of creativity happening. And the thing that makes me say that, the evidence is the warm colors that we see on the right-hand side, the cool, calming colors on the left-hand side, the gray and the dark browns and the blacks that we see. And then the perspective of our focal point is the glasses. And how is it created? It looks like it was created with paints and pastels, some colored pencils. Her technique, the technique that's used, is really standing out there. And it sends a message. To me, it could be a great advocacy piece, a great ecology piece, the message. And the intent is that we sort of see the things we want to see with the glasses. We can change the world with the way we see, or we can sort of block out the things that bother us and look for the positive in things. And if you're putting this on the side, I love that. Idealism, trees, no growth, they lack light. There's no limit to our inner vision. That's a fantastic way to look at that. And then what do we know about this? We know that there is something going on outside the glasses versus something happening inside the glasses. But what would we want to know about this? And keep your comments coming, because it's really great to ping these ideas off of each other. That we choose, maybe what we see is this artist choosing what they see, or are they choosing to see the potential that could be in the background that's surrounding this? So we're going to take what we just did, heard about, but we're going to put it with our new piece of art. We want to describe use that one word to describe. Your intent could be imagination, it could be opportunity, it could be ecology, it could be advocacy. So if you want to type really quick, what is your intent on writing about this new piece of art? Exploration, I love that. And then our visual and our written voices. How do we use those 3 voices? Do we want to engage the heart? Can we engage the brain? Are we engaging the mind? Are we showing mastery? Are we showing credibility? What is going to be the voice that we use as we do this new piece of work? Boosting creativity, I love that. Growth, perspective. Emotional, definitely from the heart, great. And then as we choose our intended audience, this is a really important. Visualize, not only do you want to choose your audience, but we want to visualize who is our audience. I mean, if you're doing this with students, is another great way to bring in the creating. Sketch who your audience is going to be. Is it going to be, if you're doing an advocacy piece, an ecology piece, are you going to be talking to the community? Are you going to be talking to your school community, to your classroom, to the larger community, your state? But choose your intended audience, and you want to have students sketch that so that they have a visual of their readers in their mind, before they begin their writing. And we have a question there, can the audience change? We'll talk about that when we go into our question section. And then lastly, we have all of these fantastic genres. We have the descriptive, the explanatory. Remember, genre is very different from voice and audience. We want to make sure that we're being very thoughtful about each of these 3 steps. But are we writing a greeting card? Are we doing an emoji poem? Are we doing a Twitter post? So before you begin the writing, we really want to choose your genre now that you know your audience and the voice that you're going to address your audience with. And before you write, we want you to think about not just a traditional genre, but really address the intent and the purpose of the image, focus on your audience, use your voice, but we sort of want to encourage you to think outside the box. Think about writing an emoji poem with just those symbols, or the journalistic article. Maybe you're doing a little quick piece for Snapchat. Maybe you're doing a diary entry. Maybe you're doing a Twitter post. But just as you're doing this, think about something a little bit different to do. And if you would like to write those, if you're doing a small 30-character Twitter post, put that in the comments. It'd be great to see how you're using this piece of art. And then as we're sort of winding down, we'd love for you to share your writing and your art. Share your writing in the text chat, how you're going to do this writing, what kind of piece you're going to do. But also, we really want to encourage you to post this in Crayola's Champion Creativity site community on EdWeb, not our site, but the community on EdWeb, so that we can see what you've created. We'd love to see the art that you've taken to extend your story. It's really fantastic to see how teachers translate these webinars into real live action and how they're going to use this with their students. We do have a new Champion Creativity community that we are launching at the end of this year that we encourage you to sign up for. I love it as an educator because it's going to be more of a collaborative site. We can learn from each other. You can learn from education thought leaders. We receive updates on art-infused education and creativity. It helps us build that creative capacity and your leadership skills, not just within yourself or your team, but really school-wide. And there are tips on there of how to be a liaison between Crayola and your school. It helps us share success stories in the professional learning community. It feels great as a teacher to do something really fantastic that's successful with your students, but it feels even better to share the stories with other educators and other teachers across the country, and then really receive recognition for being a creative catalyst. To sign up for that community, we encourage you to go to Crayola.com/champions. And yes, more of this, please. I love that. And if you're, Elizabeth, if you're looking in the webinar community, we have more of these webinars on that community. On this site will be lots more of examples like this. And then Sherry, we're going to end with a reflection.
Yeah. So we always like to close by having you think about what big ideas stick with you from the session. And we can tell from the text box that you really got engaged, that you were thinking about the artwork that we posted, and it was rich fodder for you, a springboard for figuring out who your audience was going to be and what you were going to write, your intent, and your genre. So we're asking you to put in the text box right now which big idea that we went over in this past hour session is going to stick with you, and how you plan on leveraging the power of art to enrich writing in your school community. Sometimes it really helps to think very specifically about who you're going to share this insight with. The insights around the rhetorical framework, the insights around the parallels between written and visual literacies. I know someone had mentioned before that they're going to take it to their 3rd grade professional learning community. That's really exciting. Oh, good. People are saying that they're going to use the SEEK way of looking at art. Absolutely. It's very simple. The letters are clear. It gives you a comprehensive view of how to look at a piece of art for insights. Great. People are saying that they're going to take the 6-word story. Beautiful. Wonderful. And I hope that one of the ideas that you take is that you can do this around any piece of artwork that the children in your school have created. This isn't dependent upon the 2 pieces that we showed you here today from Emma and Erica, although certainly you can use the slides that are going to be in the library. But we urge you to make it more personal and more relevant to your school by taking pieces of artwork that your students have created. And just want to make you aware that if you are excited by the ideas that you heard today, we have this information plus more that we can share as professional development delivered within your school or your district. We're working with districts across the country, making sure that they really look at literacy with this multi-literacy lens and the parallels between visual, written, digital, and mathematical literacy. And so it's something that's available to you. You can see, in the background there's sessions on making stories visible, uh, um, addressing personal identity narratives, having math be a visible language, as well as the conversation that we had today about using art to enrich writing. So it's easy to contact us, creativelyalive@crayola.com. And just want to talk about those next steps, how you can post what you've created today, how you can finish up your 6-word story and polish up your illustration, and then post it in the community here on EdWeb. EdWeb's going to send you a link. As soon as you join the community, you're going to find out how to post your 6-word story and a piece of art. And the 50 educators who do that by September 28th will receive a case, that's 24 boxes in a case, of the 16-count oil pastels, which I'm sure will inspire a lot of creative stories and artwork in your students. As we mentioned earlier, we want to see artwork from all over the world. We know we've got folks here from Peru and Ukraine, and we've got a lot of international educators on the webinar today, and we're really excited about that. But the rules for shipping into other countries limit us to sending this gift only to participants from the US and Canada. But please don't let that hold you back from sharing with us your ideas. And we also want to remind you that Crayola.com has all sorts of resources. You can join the Crayola Creativity Champion community. You can learn about the grant program that we offer to schools, learn about art-infused educational leadership, and there are 1,500 lesson plans that are art integrated. So I think it's probably time for us to move to the Q&As. We just barely have a few minutes. I just want to first start with, someone had asked earlier a question about, can the audience change? Yes, yes, yes. One of the best ways to help students understand the power of intended audience is to have them flip it and change it and see how their writing changes. So just as an example, if a student was created a piece of artwork from a carnival or a fair or an ice cream parlor or an ice cream cone, if they were writing a request for ice cream, say, to their grandmother, how might that be different from illustrating and writing a request for ice cream to their mother? Would they use emotional for one, right? Focusing on great memories with grandma. Would they use a logical data with the mother? Well, it's 3 hours till dinner. It's going to be okay. Right? How does thinking about a different audience inform that composition, that visual composition in their artwork, as well as the written composition? So yes, I just wanted to answer that question, that absolutely they should play around with different audiences and different voices. Absolutely. So so there was also a question about some of the tactical, some of the logistics for how to get their artwork posted, and I'm going to leave that to the EdWeb crew, who's going to send out the instructions. You guys can do that really clear. Brian from Indiana asked, but I think everybody's curious to know how they can do it. And I just want to clarify, Brian, it's not a contest. We're very careful not to give any kind of, judgmental piece about winning, looking for something that's the best. We actually, the first 50 educators to post their 6-word stories in art will receive that. So I just want to let you know that sometimes a contest intimidates people. They say, oh, my art's not as beautiful as, the next person. And we don't want you to feel intimidated about this. We want to see your thinking. Art makes thinking visible, and that's what we really value. So please don't think of it as a contest. Think of it as an opportunity to post. Oops, what just happened to you? Okay. And so Victoria from New Jersey asked a really interesting question about meeting the emotional needs of students who might be shy about their compositions. And I would venture to say that that might be, she asked about shy about sharing their artwork, but there are also students who are shy about sharing their writing, or as Kristen walked us through the language arts strands, they might also be shy about sharing a verbal presentation. And so what we usually find is that if students are starting with pairs or small groups of 3 or 4, that's a very comfortable, easy way to start the sharing. It can be intimidating to anyone to stand in front of 25, 30 people. So that might be a nice way to start bringing them in. Kristen, you've got experience with that. You want to share something?
I was going to say the idea of sharing small in pairs, of sharing with just a few insights given. It's a great way to encourage a child's creative confidence, because that's really what you want to do, is encourage their confidence in their ability to really share the way they communicate with themselves out into the world. And they don't always have to, we communicate in different ways, just like we share our art in different ways. There's really not one correct answer, but just gauging the look, the body language you see from the child as they're talking about their art and expressing their art. I think it's very important to do that.
And just to build on Kristen's point about different people have different approaches, that's what I love about visual art. It makes thinking visible. So a child who is hesitant with the English language or not comfortable standing in front of a group and speaking might be perfectly happy to have their artwork hung in a gallery or displayed on the display wall. It gives them, we can see their thinking. It means they have their visual voice presented without feeling like they personally are on the stage and getting nervous about that. So it's a nice way. We only have time for, I think, one more question. I just quickly want to answer. I think it's an important question from Jorge in Florida, who's asking about those recommendations of using art in English language learners or English as a second language classes. And so I just want to point out the reference for those of you who are interested. You can you can easily Google the New York State Department of Education report on using art for English language learners. So they actually use the acronym ELL, English language learners, and art. And it is a wonderful document. Thank you so much, Jorge, for asking about that. They provide all kinds of recommendations and strategies. It's a wonderful tool and actually a great advocacy piece if that you can extract some key insights for why you're using art. So I think we're just a few minutes over, so it's a wrap. We will stay on the text box. So, if you have additional things that you want to talk with us about, just text, and we can, Diane, if you keep the text box rolling for a while, we can continue the conversation through writing. Thank you very much. Oh, Wanda's got a wrap. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Wanda.
Oh my goodness. Okay, don't forget about me. I see that we're over, so I'm just going to go very quickly. Just want to remind everyone that you will receive your certificate of completion for being on today's live presentation. You'll receive that within a business day to the email that you used to log on. And if you are doing a recording or over the phone, then you'll need to join the community and take a quiz, okay? But please stay with us just for a few more slides. Of course, we're going to thank our wonderful presenters for such an engaging and enlightening presentation today. Also, just want to remind you to go to Crayola.com for additional resources, as Sherry shared with you in previous slides. Okay, so don't forget that we have lots of resources for you there. And I think one of the most important things that we must tell you is about the upcoming webinar. So please don't forget to join us for the next webinar on Wednesday, September 28th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The topic is art, essential in a well-rounded education. So very, very important topic. Our presenter will be Sherry Sturman, the Director of Education once again, but we will have a special guest also from an elementary school in Maryland. Shauna Kaufman, principal of Arnold Elementary, will be co-presenting. So please do make sure that you join our community so that you can receive the invitations for all of our upcoming webinars. I think that's it. Thank you again for joining us, and we absolutely look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.